Good morning, world. It's my birthday. I'm 35 and my life is crazy right now. One of the parts of the craziness is that my voice issues are in full form. I'm speaking to you today just after waking up, which is a pretty good time to use the voice without a lot of pain. But currently, all my work is in jeopardy because of not being able to speak for regular amounts of time, for lengths of time. And my whole situation is very in flux, but I was very clever. Past Georgia, very clever. She set up a little conversation between three of my friends, Creota Wilberg, Ryan North, and Marta Hulinska, about my book Dumb, which is about this voice issue. And basically, last year was the 5-year anniversary of the book being in the world, and it just felt right to have some people celebrate it. I knew I couldn't quite explain what the book means myself because I feel like the book is me explaining, but my friends being able to speak to knowing me and knowing what I did to make the book happen and knowing maybe like some of the impacts of it or just feeling its place in the world, that felt right. And like a very good gift to me to just listen to people talk about the impact of my work, because being a cartoonist, you don't really see a lot of impact. You make it quietly by yourself and then you send it out into the world, and like maybe you meet people sometimes who have read your work and they like it, but it's kind of hard to know, like, does this matter to anybody beyond just kind of liking it? So I asked them to help me feel the impact and to understand it, and they beautifully obliged. I haven't watched it yet though, so this on the morning of my birthday when I feel like my world is just in absolute uncertainty and it's terrifying and I just want to run away and put my head in a hole, I'm gonna watch this thing and I'm gonna report back how I feel. So enjoy, and I'm betting that I will see when it's done.
Okay, perfect.
Oh,
Oh, all right.
now
Yeah.
it
Now it
says
says it's
here
recording.
too. Good.
Hi, Georgia.
Hi, Georgia.
Hi, Georgia.
Welcome to our normal human conversation. Please select the best parts of this.
Featuring normal humans.
Yes. So,
Isn't that exciting?
isn't that exciting? Just before we started recording, we were talking about how this was a great thing to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the book Dumb coming out. And then realized, oh, it must be 10th. And then Marta was like, it's 5th. It's been 5 years.
Here it is.
Which is wild. But guess what? It's still good in my professional experience, my professional opinion.
Indeed.
Yeah.
It is still good. And actually, I use the book, I use excerpts from the book to teach, for my graphic medicine classes. And it's been a while since I used it, but looking at it again, it's like I'm still rediscovering different points that are like really important and relevant for, graphic medicine. So it just keeps refreshing itself over and over again.
That's really interesting because I approach the book purely as I like comics, I make comics, I write comics. And so this was like, oh, cool, a comic to read. And I was really impressed with it's so easy when you're doing biography to get lost in the weeds of this happened to me and therefore it's interesting. Like there's a lot of biography, in my opinion, that's not very great because it's just people talking about themselves. You haven't built the story, built the narrative, figured out what you want to say. This book is not that. This book is like it knows what it wants to say. It's very smartly constructed to get that across. So I'm glad to hear it succeeds in the graphic medicine sense. I was viewing purely as like a comic, and it succeeds there as well.
Yeah, no, it really does. There are a number of different like discoveries in terms of, how people deal with injuries, like physically and emotionally, how people have to essentially learn and discover ways to compensate for different types of issues. I mean, obviously Dumb is talking about one specific issue, but you know, it's still a kind of universal narrative that can be applied to a number of different situations. So that's, you know, it's really great.
Yeah,
Did you
and I
like
think
the
a
book?
unique thing that Georgia did with this kind of throughout the book and also in the end was like shying away from this desire to provide a really clean narrative. And you know, maybe some autobio books go too far in that direction where they're like, this is just what happened. I'm not going to try to structure it, whatever. But I know that you know, there's like this section where it's like everybody's asking, like, oh, what happened? What happened? How did you lose your voice? What happened? And it's like there's this desire to have like very neat answers to what's happening in your life
Mhm.
health-wise. And, you know, the book doesn't really end with like, and this is what happened, and now I'm cured. And I remember when Georgia was working on this, we were actually at a comics residency, and yeah, she was like, she needed to get the book done. She was like working with the ending and was like kind of like trying to figure this out, like, how do I wrap this up for people? And then eventually came to this decision to be like, no, I'm not going to wrap this up for people. This is a messy experience. There's still a lot that's uncertain and unexplained. And that's the way that health is, you know, like we so desperately want these clean answers. And I think this book kind of points out that that's not necessarily the way reality works. And I feel like this book is so good at grounding you in reality and like the present experience of the character. Even what you were saying, Ryan, earlier about like autobio books and like one thing that struck with me as I was rereading it is that it doesn't really like give you a prior introduction to who this character is. It just kind of starts off right away with the symptoms of the illness. And it's just, you're right there experiencing what's happening with her. It's not like, oh, I was this person before this happened. And it's only near the end of the book that you find out that, you know, she had this like singing practice before that's impacted, but it kind of like throws you right in this visceral way.
Yeah, it really does. And, you know, also the way she has drawn and managed to visualize pain, like emotional discomfort, all of this stuff is really also very it's shoot, I should have had coffee this morning. It's just
We can
it's
always do a
very,
second take.
I know
Yeah.
it's just,
Cut this
you know,
part.
the way she, yeah, like, you know, but the way she visualizes like pain, emotional frustration, all of these other different things, you know, with line work, with color, you know, and also the visual metaphors for pain, you know, the stars, like all of that kind of stuff is just really emotionally engaging, and I think very accessible to different readers who haven't necessarily shared the same experience. So, you know, it's just really a very like very engaging, like artistically a very smart way of working, and, you know, as a reader, just a very emotionally engaging, you know, way of presenting the situation. So
Mhm.
yeah. Okay, now on to coffee later on.
Marta, could you speak a bit more about being there at the while it was being made, sort of the choices you may have seen in doing it? Because I was fascinated to hear, like, oh, the ending took a couple of runs to figure out how that's going to work and how I'm going to do that. And I'd love to hear more about anything you recollect from that time.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be based on like my poor memory and like we were saying earlier, like the COVID brain
Yeah.
miasma that
And
we've
Georgia's
all
gonna be
been
like, that none of
impacted
that
by.
happened like that at all. She's
But
making stuff.
yeah, like I basically became friends with Georgia just as she was beginning to work on this project. So I did get to see um, different aspects of the progress. And I think she was coming out in it with like zines or, you know, like volumes of it before it was collected.
Mhm.
And I don't know how much she had like the whole thing planned out. She probably had, you know, a general outline in her head, but she was sort of like working on it section by section. The things that stand out to me from the comics residency, one was just her materials and like her the immediacy in how she uses materials. Like I do a lot of like printmaking and like paper cut in the way that I make comics. So my comics are so like laborious, and I think she was using like different like drawing markers, drawing pens, like maybe even a red Sharpie or something like that. So it was very like, here's this thing that I'm drawing like super directly. I don't even think she penciled at all or very much. Like it was just, again, kind of similar to the way the comic or the book itself has this like visceral, immediate feeling. Like that was the way that she was producing it. And yeah, I just remember, so we were at this week-long residency at this place called Warbler's Roost in South River, Ontario. And we were all working on different projects, and she was just like, yeah, staying up late every night. I think, yeah, she was supposed to have finished the comic at a certain date and had a little bit of an extension, and was just like, yeah, battling with this idea of like, how do I wrap this up? How do I end it? And at that point in her health journey, she was still like struggling with her voice. So there was no, you know, legitimate way to say like, this is the way that this ended, because it was an ongoing thing. And I think that there was an emotional honesty that she was striving to maintain in the book. So yeah, in the end, she does kind of, you know, end up with some sort, a little bit more support than she had throughout, but it's still this like journey, and it's kind of like the beginning of this other journey of, you know, exploring whatever pain or trauma or whatever that she's carrying that might have caused this. So yeah, I just really admired her process for so many different reasons, like the immediacy of the physical making, but also just the immediacy almost of the writing process, where it's not all like completely scripted and planned out in advance. And, you know, I know a lot of people who make comics who make them in all sorts of different ways, and you can make them successfully in all sorts of different ways. But I always, yeah, I always really like respond to things that are done kind of from like an emotional well or something.
Yeah, I find it fascinating, the idea of immediacy in comics, because it's such a labor-intensive medium, no matter how you cut it. But the way she drew the book, in the way that, like you say, maybe there weren't pencils, maybe just going straight to ink, like that sort of, it's both confident, but also it puts you right there, like this is someone going from brain to hand to paper. And if this, you could have the exact same story done in prose, and I don't think it would work nearly as well, because you'd have that distance of the typesetter, where it would feel like this is just words professionally printed on a page, when in the comic you get, this is someone's life, this is someone's experience, this is how they are seeing it right now. It feels so much more personal and real, and it's doing that, you know, in a way that really only comics can do. You don't get that in prose, and that's one of the things I like about the book so much, is that it not only exists on its own as, here's a great, you know, piece of comic art, but it also, I think, just by dint of its existence, argues for what comics can do that others can't, like what makes comics special. And it's this direct connection to the person that really feels vibrant, I find, in the book, in the text.
Yeah, you know, I'm going to be thinking about your brain to hand to paper phrase for the next couple of days. That's a really great phrase, just to think about it, you know. So
Thanks.
Excellent.
I may have plagiarized it from somewhere. I don't know if I made it up on the spot or not, but I will take all the credit. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. And, you know, I'll steal it, but just I won't be recorded stealing it, so it'll be okay.
I was thinking about the other day, partially in prep for this and partially just that's how I choose to live my life. And it was making me wish that there was more of it. Like this was a deeper, wider genre of book, fiction, nonfiction, anything. And I think the reason my thoughts were going along that way is that the book kind of is what it has to be and doesn't feel like it's trying to fit into a box. Like it's not like Georgia sat down and said, okay, now I'm going to do a autobiographical medical nonfiction comic. There's not a ton of those already, but also it's just, what I'm struggling to articulate is the book feels like it is what it needs to be, And it's very hard, I find, as a writer to do that, to come up with something that doesn't exist in conversation with genre restraints or genre
Mm.
expectations.
Mhm.
That's hard. Like it's sort of hard to remove yourself from culture as a whole and be like, what do I want to do? What does this need to be? And Dumb to Me is one of the few books, I think, where it does feel like this book is in the shape it needs to be and exists almost outside the genre expectations that we all carry with us, which again, love it. I love when that happens. It's a rare
Yeah.
pleasure.
Yeah. And, you know, it's also, you know, as she was writing it, it's almost like, you know, a personal journal or diary, like that she was going through the process, that she was so close to the experiences as she was, you know, drawing them and writing them for the rest of us to experience, I think also really kind of helps to tip the narrative and the whole work over that like edge of, you know, expectation or whatever. It's just really uh yeah, the, you know, Georgia's, you know, Georgia's a good enough cartoonist to be able to separate herself enough from her personal life in order to like make work about her personal life, but at the same time, you know, she was able to separate herself, but there wasn't that much distance to separate because it was still happening. So the immediacy
Mhm.
is still like really, really um, you know, really apparent and really powerful, I think. So
Yeah, and I think she also really trusts the reader, like as I was going through it last night, again, just like realizing that like she doesn't feel the need to like explain every little thing, you know, like it's very much like there's all these different ways and different kinds of scenes. Like there's these silent scenes, there's these scenes where she's like battling with herself, and like there's no, I don't know, it's not underestimating the reader to be like, oh, I need to know who this friend character is and what their relationship is. Like sometimes you're kind of thrown into this scene without a lot of build up to it,
Mhm.
or you know, like context, but there's that expectation that the reader is going to be able to like pick up on these little cues to kind of understand the story. And yeah, I think there's like a really beautiful use of restraint in that way, to not like over explain and just kind of again like get to the emotional honesty of like, what is this scene expressing, and that's enough. You don't need to know all these like extra little things, yeah,
It
for
gives
it
it
to
a
resonate with you.
sorry, yeah. It gives it
yeah,
like a an intimacy where it's like someone telling you a story and you don't know all the people in their life, so you don't need to know this whole person's origin and backstory, but it's what happens, so it's there in the narrative. Which, sounds easy to do, just don't care about introducing characters, but it's not that. You have to actually make sure there's enough there in the text that supports who these people are, the questions get answered, but you can still enjoy the text and feel like there's a whole world out there without feeling lost. I guess I keep getting these same notes of like there's some really skillful, almost invisible craft to what's being done here, which supports the text and makes it feel like you're right there with her, living this life, feeling this experience, which I think is great for autobiography or for even like talking about this medical condition. It's you don't want someone, I mean, I can't speak for George, but I wouldn't want someone to close the book and be like, well, glad that's not happened to me. And that's the only thing they're taking from it. Like you want to feel like you're aligned with the person and having that and learning it and like going on the same journey that she's gone on because of this medical condition. And I think it's really successful in that.
yeah, yeah. And well, as a cartoonist who can't help but over explain everything in every
Right
piece she
here,
ever
right there
does.
with you.
Yeah, me too. So like I really admire the way she's managed to like bring us all along without taking a break to talk about the intricacies of anything.
Mm-hmm.
So
As a Canadian, I feel like it does a really good job of skewering our health system, just in the sense of like, you know, especially in like the Canada US cross-border
Oh,
dynamic,
yeah.
there's this assumption that like, oh, we actually have healthcare, therefore everything is great, which, you know, things have only gotten worse in the 5 years that she produced this book. But I think it really demonstrates to you that like the medical professionals here will make sure that you're not actively dying. And if you are not actively dying, after that, you're kind of on your own, and you're like put through this cycle of like wait times and like super long processes to see, like get tests, get results, but you know, like wait and see kind of thing. So yeah, I think the book does a really good job of that too, like addressing these like more personal, like you were saying before, like the kind of emotional components or like the social dynamics of navigating health or illness. But I think it also shows like, and like the welfare aspect of it too, like, you know, if you are someone who hasn't had a disability or a temporary disability, you might have certain assumptions of like what kind of healthcare you'll get, what sort of social supports you get. And it just really pokes holes in like this presentation that we do have these social structures. And like once you're in them, then you start to recognize where those like missing gaps are. And yeah, my hope is that when somebody closes the book, they have like a much deeper awareness of like what people with different health issues or like living with disabilities are going through in a more like realistic way.
Yeah, we in Canada skate by a lot on being like, well, we have more healthcare than in America, but like that's not the, it's a very low bar to clear.
Yeah.
I have a friend who had a mental health crisis, went to the emergency room, and they were like, do you want to harm yourself right now? And he was like, well, you know, not right now, no, but 2 hours ago, yes. And they were like, well, not right now, so you're good now. Out the door you go. It's like, great.
Yeah.
Glad I spent my afternoon there.
Yeah, for me, you know, I'm in New York, and so it's also like very interesting to like, you know, read the perspective on healthcare from like other countries. And reading the book, I'm like, oh yeah, even Canadians need more physicians and more healthcare providers, because that's why everybody has to wait so long to like actually get an appointment. So it's interesting because even though I, you know, I find myself wishing that we had a more similar system to the Canadian system, there are still some similarities, you know, some events that I can see. You know, we have other things in common that aren't necessarily the things that I
Yeah. And there's like
admire.
that class and like financial component of it too, which would be the
Yeah.
same in US or Canada, right? Like
Yeah,
this book
yeah.
would be very different if, you know, Georgia had the financial resources to just be like, I'm taking 6 months off to heal from my life. So
Yes.
it doesn't really like go into, well, it's like there's that scene there. There's never like a exposition, you know, narrative of like, this is where I'm commenting on this, but you know, that component is definitely in there. Yeah, just kind of like as an aspect of how people experience health issues.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll show this just for the video. I was able to unearth this tiny zine from the first time I met Georgia, and it was actually at Expo Zine in 2012. And this is like proto-dumb, where she's explaining how, yeah, she's not able to speak and using her lipstick code. Yeah, and she was walking around the comics festival, and she had this little zine that she was like handing out to people, and we had like a bit of a conversation where, you know, she was not speaking, but she was so like animated and expressing her enthusiasm about this comic. So I thought that was really fun. I was really hoping I'd be able to find that in my archives. I guess that also like points out to another thing to me that I was thinking about as I was reading through the book, was just this almost like pressure to be positive about things that are really challenging, you know?
Yes.
Like part of, I think, why we connected is I could like, even without speaking at this show, I could sense her like love and enthusiasm for comics, and we like connected over that. And that's something that like comes up in the book, where it's like initially she's able to make positives out of it, but there's only so long like you can keep pushing yourself and being like, I'm going to be positive before you reach that wall. And like health is like one of the aspects where that will often happen to people, where they're like, okay, there is actually a boundary that I can't get beyond with that, with like my own can-do attitude.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a skill. What you're discussing, like being able to talk to someone, converse with someone when they can't speak back. It's the sort of thing where you can immediately tell when you're not doing well at it. You're like, I wish I was better at this. I want to be better at this. Because I remember a similar conversation where I already knew Georgia, but she came by, I think it was at TCAF, and she wasn't speaking that day. And I did not do very well because I kept like asking questions that were not yes or no, detailed questions. What am I felt bad afterwards. Never spoke to her about this. Sorry, Georgia. This is me realizing that I felt bad and confessing it now.
Yeah,
But yeah, it's a skill.
yeah, she's really been able to like compensate in some really remarkable ways. I have a memory before the book came out. I have a memory of like being at TCAF. My spouse Bob and I were in a bar with Georgia, and all the TCAF, everybody was there. It was super loud, and it's like we spent an hour or two hanging out at a table, and Bob and I would essentially be, talking, which would be yelling at the top of our lungs.
Yeah.
And then Georgia would just like type her responses on her phone, and we'd just read her responses. And my memories of our conversation or of that evening like don't even I have to keep reminding myself that she wasn't speaking, because I feel like
Mm-hmm.
she was so good at expressing herself. You could tell, she could use technology really quickly. And then also she just, her body language, her facial expression, the way, she would react to our own conversations, like it was just such a seamless event. I was really, the next day I was super impressed by, how my experience of her inability to speak just wasn't even, I mean, obviously it's significant for me as I think about it, but in the moment, like in the memory of the conversation, it wasn't even relevant. It's amazing. And I feel like, she's managed on so many different levels to, compensate for this and also deal with it emotionally in terms of like her work with, her minis in the book and whatever. It's just been really, superhuman effort all the way around. And, that's also just, when the book came out, she came down here to New York City, and, we went to a bookstore. I did an interview with her, about the book, and just, she just essentially has been making superhuman effort on all levels for so long. It's just been really, really impressive. So anyway.
So
Yeah,
your
I think it
memory was
speaks to.
sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, fine. I was gonna say so in your memory it just felt like hanging out with Georgia. Like you weren't remembering any accommodations she used. It was just like, yeah, we hung out, we had a great time.
Yep.
I was just going to say, I think it like speaks to what an expressive person Georgia is, which translates when you're speaking to her in person, but also translates so clearly in the book. And I mean, I think, yeah, being like a musician and performer and like, involved in like community arts, like she's so enthusiastic about all these different things. So it's not surprising that she like brought that enthusiasm to this experience. But I also appreciate that the book kind of like troubles or questions that, like this tendency to be like, oh, this person has a superpower, or like, like, oh, like, because I totally recognize that feeling of like, oh, it didn't feel like I just had a conversation with someone who wasn't speaking. But it also shows you like the other side of things, where it's like, yeah, she might be able to communicate in these ways, but that does take a toll. And gosh, one of the most visceral parts of the book for me in reading it in the past and rereading it is the part where she's like in some loud bar environment, and there's the person who's like translating an AS or like speaking to her in ASL and like translating on her behalf, and just that like deep feeling of like a lack of consent or like control, like it's expressed so well. Yeah, so like kind of like I think I completely agree with you that it's like so impressive, and Georgia's like enthusiasm and zest for life has like helped her navigate this. But I really also appreciate in the book how there's like that vulnerability of like, these are the sort of challenges that someone may not show you. And I'm also the type of person that's like, I'm going to keep all of my struggles hidden. And like in day-to-day life, like maybe there's a couple people I'll show them to, but I'm just going to like keep rolling with the punches. And, you know, it's really hard sometimes to like reveal that to others. So I appreciate the book for that, for sure.
Yeah, and I'd say the moral message is that superpowers can help you cope with, you know, with aspects of disability, but they can't cure you.
Mhm.
You know, it's like,
Yeah.
so you can see a lot of resilience there, but even so, you know, it's not, you know, it's not gonna cure your condition. You know, the condition goes on, which, I mean, yeah. Anyway, I was about to prattle off about autobio, but now I'll stop.
You can.
Yeah.
I was just going to prattle off about like autobio and story plots because, you know, it's like, you know, our lives usually don't structure themselves in such a way that make for good reading. And Georgia's been able to acknowledge that and still give an ending that works, you know, because it also, you know, helps to reflect, you know, how life continues on, you know, in these ways. And, you know, it's good. And yeah, and there's, you know, again, there's just, you know, there's never like, again, in autobiography, there's usually not just the like, okay, my story's over forever. You know?
Happily ever after.
Happily ever after, like we're done now because I'm just going to be, you know, hanging out and nothing's going to happen. And that just doesn't work. So anyway, that's the most satisfying reading, you know, plot for most readers, but at the same time, you know, it's a real challenge, and she's really managed to find a way to get this going. So that's good.
Yeah, the concept of superpower. I had some dental surgery a couple of years ago, and so wasn't allowed to move my jaw or talk for a couple days.
Mm.
And I remember clearly hanging out with friends, and my normal mode in that conversation is like we're riffing, it's very quick, you'll interrupt each other to make a joke, like it's bam, 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 bam. And I can't do that typing on a phone. Like my joke is now 3 jokes behind by the time I get out there and try to show it. And it felt very isolating because I was there present, but I couldn't engage the way I would normally do that. And the accommodation I'd come up with was not working. And you know, this moment like, oh yeah, I read this. I read I know this story. I'm not alone in this. This is the experience of having that. Um, yeah. Just like most autobiography, I don't have a fine conclusion to that story. It just sort of stops.
Well, what I just picked up from it is like this, I'm not alone in this, you know, like this book is such a strong, like kind of powerful like tool for that, you know, like you were saying earlier, Crota, it's like somebody doesn't have to experience the same like health issue, but like there's so much in this book that will uplift maybe, but also just like provide that empathy and that sense of community for people who might be experiencing like similar troubles of navigating their accommodations or accommodations not being sufficient, or just those sort of like positive and negative aspects of new ways of having to exist.
Yeah. We've got 2 minutes left, and I think the way recording works is it has to upload. Everyone shares their local video once I hit stop recording. So I'm gonna hit stop recording soon, so we'll use the last 2 minutes to sort of sync and upload. Anything anyone wants to say before I hit stop?
Bye, Georgia.
Thanks, Georgia.
Thanks for putting the book out.
Miss you.
Yeah. that too. Miss you.
Yes. Hopefully see you soon. Okay, no one go anywhere. I'm gonna hit pop. Or not pop, I'm gonna hit stop.
Oh my gosh, that was delightful. Oh, my first thought is that I miss my friends, and then my next thought, yeah, I'm in that mode again, and it's wild hearing people talk about how I was back then because I just experienced it. I was tabling at the St. John's Farmers Market for the book club that I run at Downtown Comics, and I did so with my lipstick on, just like in the book. And that environment of like getting excited and trying to share comics with people without my voice, it felt so much like home. And that's what they're talking about, my like mode of enthusiasm and just like being expressive and jumping in to connect people to comics, which I love so much, and TCAF, which was mentioned many times. It's in the book, and it's also how I know a lot of these people. I'm just like, oh, I'm there again, but I'm also trying to recall that energy of like, how did I do this before? How did I make this okay? And honestly, I didn't solve it or make it okay. There's not like a solution I need to remember and then everything will be fine. It really is exactly like what I'm experiencing now, which is like I need to use my voice when I can, and presently I'm starting to feel the warning signs of needing to stop. And I also just need to like feel a lot of pain and feel a lot of alone and feel a lot of scared and struggle. I was really like touched and pleased that they all felt like this book could provide a sense of not being alone to other people, because I don't think we can ever like completely remove that feeling from life. It's going to come and go as it does, like so many other feelings, but it was like bringing me back to like, right, and I'm not alone in this experience, and I'm going through it again, and I also have like my former self to be going through it with me in the form of this book, which is a strange thought, but it also like it works for some reason. You never know what's gonna help you or feel right in a moment to make things feel better, and that one for some reason is doing it for me right now, so I'm just gonna be grateful. I don't need to question it. So huge thank you to my friends whose work you probably know, and if you don't, please seek it out because they're beautiful people and beautiful cartoonists. Like Ryan's books are quite well known. Creota's work I think should go much further, and Marta's has been slow burning its way through our communities, but like when we get a full book of Marta Hudalinska's work, especially I'm looking forward to Babcha, the paper cut comic she references. Oh my goodness. Yeah, you're gonna know. You're gonna know who she is if you don't already. But you can get ahead of the curve and start seeking these people out. I'm gonna go probably lie on the couch for a lot of my birthday now. It's true. Maybe do a little bit of computer here or there, but mostly, I mean, my voice hurts and I just need to rest and eat and sleep and yeah, see what the day brings. Bye.